Thank God.
Thank God.
I'm resident of Collinwood for YouTube. Joel Sains. I'm joined by my buddy Gordon Dymowski, my buddy Patrick McCray. We're here to review another Sherlock Holmes movie, and really, really good too. Murder by Decree. Guys, this was very gritty, and I
Yeah.
love it. Sherlock Holmes sort of goes up against Jack the Ripper, if you will, a bit. So I do want to
Goes up
give
against the system.
yeah, I do want to give some
He
context.
sticks it to the man.
It does. I do want to give this context that I'd first learned about Jack the Ripper right at the tail end of elementary school. So there were many theories of who was Jack the Ripper and stuff. And there are, if you go by history, there was a rumor that Jack the Ripper was just hired by the royal family. And I had never seen this movie or heard of it until you guys talked about it, and I watched it today. And I find it interesting that there's a royal family connection in this movie. Is that where the rumor came from, this movie, or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there had been
No. Well,
there had been, and there's a credit at the very, very end that talks about recent theories. But there had been a book that was published, actually one or two books that had been published a few years before, because one of the books that this movie kind of pulled from, and it fictionalized some of the names. It was the same source that Alan Moore used when he wrote his graphic novel From Hell. So
I was about to
it
say,
was
this
kind
is
of a
basically the
newish.
same thing.
It was a then newish idea.
That's funny because she didn't look newish. Continue. Yeah, it's the story of From Hell. It's the same basic, theory.
This movie, I love the way it's shot. It's very gothic feel. It's a movie that's a bit of a slasher in a sense, but it's not a complete slasher. It has slasher elements, is what I'll say. But it also has great psychology. Christopher Plummer does a great job. So I do have to ask you, who's your favorite Sherlock Holmes, guys?
Favorite and best are two different things. So, Gordon, who's yours?
Yeah,
Okay, if I had to, although when I was a kid, I was partial to Basil Rathbone. My actual personal favorite, and this is going to be a real dark horse, and it'll be controversial, Johnny Lee Miller in Elementary, because he does something really unique with the role. Because his Sherlock Holmes is modern day, but he's a recovering addict, and he's also trying to figure out, okay, I'm this really smart guy, I'm brilliant, but there's a lot that I still need to work out. And I think he's able to play that and still be a really good detective.
I've not seen
the usual cliche.
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I think the only place it's streaming is on Hulu.
Okay.
And you can get. I would suggest, if I don't know how effective Knoxville's public library system is, but you might want to try just checking out the DVDs from the library. I mean, it's very much a procedural, like it's like CSI without so much science, but it is very good. And it's the best acting Aidan Quinn's done since he was in that movie where he was dancing with Daryl Hannah to Romeo Voigt's Never Say Never. So just putting that out there.
I'm still here.
Who was your favorite, Patrick? Who's your favorite Sherlock Holmes?
I almost want to say Ben Kingsley, and without a clue. He is the most positive and energetic of the Holmes regenerations. I have to go with Jeremy Brett. It's an easy fallback, I know. No, I'll tell you who my favorite is. Frank Langella. Langella did the play, the William Gillette play, and it was filmed by HBO. Very hard to find. Wonderful. Langella's terrific. He is positive. He has a good sharp wit. He is likably. He's smooth in his smugness. Langella's marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, if you're to ask me for the best Holmes, I would say Jeremy Brett.
Yeah.
I actually watched the final the Sherlock Holmes movie where he dies at the end. So
A movie?
yeah, where he falls up the waterfall.
Oh, you mean the final
Oh,
problem?
Yeah,
that was probably the Jeremy Brett episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. That's what I watched. I watched the movie we're discussing now. I watched this movie and I watched the final problem today.
Okay, well, you saw a very good version of it.
I did.
I mean, the only version of it.
You want to know where I found it? YouTube.
Really?
Yeah,
For you.
that's where I found that at because I was trying to find the 7% solution, and it popped up. The movie popped up. So I was like, you know what? Since I can't find that movie, I'll just watch this one, even though we're not going to discuss it tonight. But we're discussing Murder by Decree.
Joel, my suggestion to you is go back to YouTube and do a search for The Empty House.
Okay.
Which is where they bring him back. It's Empty House, right? It's not an empty room or something. It's Empty House.
Yeah, it's Empty House. And ironically, the two stories, even though they take place within a short period of time, I think it's only like a year or two, they're actually written about 10 years apart.
Damn.
It was literally after Conan Doyle writes Hunt of the Baskervilles, the fans are like, oh no, okay, fine, yeah, you did this retrospective novel. We want new adventures of Sherlock Holmes, and so in around early 1900s, the empty house.
I have a question about that. For Sherlockians, in terms of understanding the continuity, if 10 years passed in real time, but only a year or so passed in Sherlock Holmes time, does that mean all of the stories coming after it are taking place 10 years prior to their writing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Doyle kind of fudged in the latter half, kind of fudged some of the years so that they take longer, so that by the time you get to his last bow, which is roughly 1910, 1911, like it's contemporaneous with early World War I, but it's not like, but Doyle was not a strict continuity guy. At the time, had there been movies, there would not have been a Sherlock Holmes cinematic universe, because Doyle just did not care. Because then in 1926, he writes the stories that becomes the casebook of Sherlock Holmes, which sucks on toast. I mean, it was
the Devil's Foot is in that, right?
I think it's Devil's Foot. I think my personal favorite is The Problem of Thor Bridge, but it's just not none of the stories are well written. It's basically it's a cash grab.
The Jeremy Brett version, Jewel, if you decide to watch that, to my knowledge, follows pretty much the written continuity of the stories.
Yeah.
In the first season is Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Give me 1 second, guys. Go ahead and talk.
Sure. Oh, that Sherlock Holmes, he's great. What now? I gotta ask, what do you make of Benedict's Sherlock Holmes?
I think he's good. I think that the big issue, I think, was just the real purpose of that series, and both Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss had made it clear, it was they were doing basically Sherlock Holmes fan fiction. And I
Yeah.
think, and Moffat has two professional traits. The first is he's he's really good at plotting and doing intricate plots that they kind of weave in and out of each other.
Okay.
And the second is that he tends to be a little bit more of the he likes writing about clever people, and the first 3 seasons are pretty good in that how he plots them, but then the fourth just kind of goes off the rails. It's why
Okay.
I like Elementary a lot better, because he doesn't the writing there doesn't make Sherlock Holmes a superhero. He makes him a human being. And the other thing is, I think that I think it's like season 3 or 4 of Elementary. Robert Hewitt Wolf comes in, who helps really shape the narrative and moves it. It keeps up the Sherlock as recovering addict, but like their take on Hound of the Baskervilles in series 4. It's an episode called Hounded, and basically the actual hound is a robot dog. It's one of those weird 4-legged police robot things that they just took out of commission because they don't really work that well.
But this movie, guys, like you guys said, Sherlock Holmes is taking on the system, but he is also taking on a killer, Jack the Ripper. When you guys first saw this, because it's a very gritty film, it's very dark, it's very gothic. What did you guys first think of it when you first watched it?
I was about 7. I saw it in the theaters when it came out, and I liked it. I liked a lot of elements of it. It was a little too long. It was a little too long and complicated for a 7-year-old to get, a lot of direct pleasure out of. But I really appreciated it. And watching it now, I mean, there are moments that just take my breath away. The Watson is both very active and takes a lot of damage. Takes a lot of damage in this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I saw it when I was in middle school, and I think that the grit and the tone actually help, because a lot of Holmes movies to that time were, except with some rare exceptions like Private Life and 7% Solution, were pretty much in the, Sherlock Holmes was very clipped, very, very straight, very, very straightforward, very, he was one personality type and Watson was the other. And this, I think, gave it a little bit more of a balance and made it. I mean, this is not the first Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper movie made. There's one made in the 60s by a British company that was working with the Doyle estate called A Study in Terror, which is available on Tubi. And it's kind of like it's okay. Like if you had to choose between seeing A Study in Terror or the Hammer Hound of the Baskervilles, go with the Hammer Hound of the Baskervilles. I mean, A Study in Terror is pretty much kind of just a straightforward. It's a good waste of time, but I'd rather spend the time with the Hammer Hound of the Baskervilles because that's got Peter Cushing, that's got Christopher Lee, and it's a lot more fun.
Yeah, it is. That movie's awesome. It's a great checkout for sure. And it's easy to find. I mean, that's some of the Sherlock Holmes movies that you can find on stream. There's some on Pluto, there's some on Tubi, there's some on YouTube. So you can find some of these movies. Now, some are a little more difficult, as we've talked about. But this movie it wasn't too difficult to find. This one wasn't. I just typed in murder by decree, where can I stream it? And it brought that site up that I sent to you guys.
You got to see a lot of commercials, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Oh my God. I've never seen so many commercials in something. It was really impressive.
Here's a pro tip, and I find that it works for Tubi and somewhat with Peacock. If you have a decent ad blocker, or use the browser, which has a built-in ad blocker, it removes the ads. It's like
I was
magic.
watching it on Plex through the PlayStation, so we were way away from that.
But yeah, but it's kind of the that's kind of the future of streaming. Is it looks like when Amazon now is going to start charging to remove commercials at the end of January, rather than, oh hey, if you're showing ads mean revenue, maybe make it free. I mean, Amazon even has their own freebie version, and one of these days I'm going to try to convince either one or both of you to start watching Leverage.
Okay.
Because it's basically caper heist it's like Mission Impossible, but with social justice themes, and it's actually fun. All sorts of Doctor Who and interesting little references. Plus, there's at least one halfway decent fight, which will please Joel to no end. No, the fight choreography on these shows is, I mean, it was low budget. It was on TNT, but you'd like it. But back to Murder on Decree, because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, this movie is a lot of fun. Again, I like the atmosphere, guys, in this movie is really awesome. What did you guys think of it?
Oh yeah, I mean it has, as a Jack the Ripper story. If we ignore the Sherlock Holmes part, the tone of it, I think, is really right.
Mm-hmm.
The incredibly duplicitous nature of the victims, because it ennobles them a lot. He has a big heart about all of this, but although they do some pretty sleazy stuff, like what they do to Watson in the alley, and stuff like that, it's the atmosphere is terrific, and from what I've read, it comes very close to feeling like what it actually felt like back then. It's a very dark movie. It's a very claustrophobic movie. That scene in the alley where you can't get away. That's very accurate. You could not film a movie that would accurately tell the story of the murders and feature the murders because it was so dark. That's one of the reasons the Ripper was able to do what he did. We think of this London by gaslight thing, which is kind of a myth. Certain areas, Mayfair, so on, had stuff like that. But really, outside the posher areas of that square mile, it was a mess. And you had tall buildings, you had tremendous pollution in the atmosphere from all the coal and stuff that was being burned. And when it got dark, because also in Victorian London, they had a window tax. And, when you hear people whip out the violin, not Sherlock Holmes, but about, the horrors of the Industrial Revolution and so on, and the people working in buildings with no windows, which is all true and terrible. There are still some conditions that were better than they were, out on the farm. But the other thing is that those conditions did not necessarily exist primarily because of evil capitalists. They existed because it was just too expensive. You'd pay these taxes for windows. You paid taxes by the room, which is why they often had armoires and things like that, because a closet was considered a room, and they would tax you on that. The living conditions, I think the portrayal of medicine and psychiatric medicine's pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
The living conditions that these victims were in, let me describe a typical room. For one thing, you had a lot of people living to a room, usually. Often there was no furniture, there were no beds. There'd be a rope that would be strung across the room that people would hang off of. They would stick their arm over it and just kind of collapse, and that's how they slept. And, in terms of indoor plumbing, no. Chamber pots, often no. Sometimes, and, we're talking about that specific area, the Whitechapel area, there would just be a corner of the room, an open corner of the room that would be designated the toilet area. And that's where you went. And people just got to live with the smell. And I mean, it was just a horrifying, grim, gritty, ugly time. to be poor in that era. Yeah.
Gordon?
Yeah, it's Victorian England was not, we're used to in a lot of movies, and especially a lot of BBC, historical dramas. It's very glamorous and very rich and very, opulent and comforting. Well, that was the wealthy class. Most people, all I can say is ditto for what Patrick said, and I think the film does this. It may be one of the most honest portrayals of Victorian London
Yeah.
and Holmes' time in the movies, because it never feels like it's not all like gaslights. And there's a famous poem by Vincent Starrett, who's one of the earliest Sherlockian scholars. He wrote a biography of Sherlock Holmes, ironically titled "The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes." And it's public domain, so you should be able to find it. I think it was published in like 24, 25. But in one of his poems, and I forget the name of it, but there's a line in it where it's always 1885. And there's that romantic idea of what Victorian London is, thanks to the Sherlock Holmes stories, but it was also very abject poverty. And there was such contempt for, there's an unspoken contempt for the rich. And there's a gentleman by the name of Ernest R. Hornung, who ironically was Conan Doyle's brother-in-law. And he was inspired by, he's like, this art guy, I want to get in on that sweet, sweet Sherlock Holmes money. But he's not going to write a competing detective because there had been competition. So he creates a character named Raffles. And Raffles is a gentleman thief, and his chronicler is a man named Bunny. I'm not being facetious. This isn't one of my jokey jokes. The man's name is Bunny. And Raffles' attitude is, you know what? I just steal because I steal from rich people because rich people deserve to get robbed. I don't like them. So there is some contempt for the upper classes, and it's and so as Patrick said, Victorian London, the urban life was not that easy and sweet. And I think, again, the film, especially towards the end, where Holmes is telling off the prime minister and the government people and revealing the whole plot, where it's just, hey, if I could hold you to task, I would. And that, I think, again, this is one of the more honest films about Victorian London. Probably even so than maybe even 7% Solution, because one of the things that was also going on in Victorian society, it was cocaine culture. Cocaine was the cannabis of the 19th century. Just, it was everywhere. And even Freud got into it a bit, but then he realized, yeah, maybe this cocaine is too good. I'll just stick with cigars.
Well, compared to the ruination of opium, that has turned people into zombies, it's kind of understandable why you would have cocaine as an alternative, either to work with it and pep them up later, or you just keep them pepped up.
Yeah. Yeah. Drugs have always been an interesting subject in movies, for sure.
Sure.
I remember.
What show should have had more drugs? Dark Shadows. Like, they should have had like Cyrus Longworth come in, just be like this hippie, like, hey man, let's do some stuff, and then he drops acid and instead of John Yeager being evil, he's like, hey man, let's chill, bro.
Well, look at how, if there had been a slightly more accurate portrayal of Quentin Collins, and Evan Hanley, those guys, tremendous hopheads.
You could have had somebody from Wyncliffe stealing medication and selling it on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Julia and her sedatives. I mean,
Yeah.
she could, if they had it at the time, she could have opened up her own store on Etsy.
Dr. Hoffman, the needle. And think of what really ticks off Adam. So that his first association with any human is getting stabbed with a needle.
Yeah, that's true too.
And not the fun
You know.
kind either.
Yeah, all he wanted was a ham sandwich, for God's sake.
Yeah, he couldn't even get a chicken leg without it being waved in his face.
He was spectacular at soup eating, though.
Yeah.
He really was a fine soup eater, and I think that's one of the things that he and Stokes really had in common. They get down and funky with a bowl of Campbell's.
Yeah.
Because they both knew that soup is good food.
Yes. Soup is great food.
I will okay, now you've thrown down the gauntlet. I am very anti-soup. I am anti-soup. I think it is a salty beverage. If it can largely be consumed in a mug with a spoon at the end, or for just to pick up the refuse, the dregs that are down in there, the overboiled potato, and so on and so forth, it's not worthy of being food. Soup is the food that an adult feeds a child to let the child know that their obligation has been discharged, but there's no love. There's nothing like that. This is as opposed to stew, even a tagine, if you will, which is that's man soup. That's real soup. That's the real thing. And there, you put in a mug. I want stew where you turn it like this in the mug and it still is in there. I've always been opposed to soup. There's only one soup that I make. It's pumpkin peanut butter soup. It's very thick, very rich, hearty, but for the most part, you'll never be my friend, soup. Never.
I'm glad we're not sponsored by any kind of soup.
Sponsor?
Yeah.
So there's a cut. There's money coming our way.
No.
At last.
Well, there goes that surprise to get Patrick.
What was that?
I was planning to get you a nice assortment of soups, but since you're not a soup guy, that would not be a good idea.
No, I would fly into one of my trademark rages, like Vertigo all over again, but with soup.
What did you guys think of the Jack the Ripper story here that we're getting with this movie?
I think white chili is even worse. A palate bean broth. Sorry, the Jack the Ripper thing.
I'm with you on the white chili. White chili.
It's an abomination. And when people try and say, "Hey, let's have chili," great. It's white chili.
Go ahead.
And now Jules is making a beeline for the bathroom or something. Are we going to see him in those pants? Where did he go? Where are you? Where do you hide? Where is that faraway place?
Chicken corn chowder? No.
It burns, Jewel. It burns. Put down the soup. Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, chicken corn chowder. It's a waste of chicken and it's a waste of corn.
That's a can that you put on my chest in the coffin that keeps me immobilized.
But yeah, white chili is like no, you need the red. It needs to have that warmth. It's not white chili. It's like hey, let's just you know what? Let's just like throw some glue in there. Let's just throw some bleach to make it look bland.
It's the Protestant answer to chili. Catholics gave us chili, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Catholic culture gave us chili. Gordon, you gave us, I guess, that fine Polish food, kielbasas and so on, and pierogies.
Punchkis.
Exactly, whichever keys you want.
Mm-hmm.
The Irish, of course, gave us all sorts of wacky stews and things, but once a Protestant enters the building, forget it. You're not eating well. And this is where the Jews and the Catholics once again align in a war for aesthetic survival against the Protestant invasion.
Yeah. A Protestant's
Said McCray
idea
to Dymowski. Yeah.
Yeah. A Protestant's idea of like fine, savory, really well-tasting food is a Velveeta sandwich on white bread with mayonnaise.
As Roger Ebert said, the biggest decision a Protestant has to make, the biggest dilemma is which color of yellow tie do they wear to church?
What did you guys think of the Jack the Ripper story in this movie?
We both enjoyed it.
Yeah,
It was great. It's terrific.
And Drew, I'm a little dismayed that you were willing to bring out a can of chicken corn chowder and show it off. I mean, my attitudes about soup are maybe not as strong as Patrick, but I can acknowledge that chicken corn chowder is an abomination against God and nature.
you want to have somebody make you a stew or make you some soup? Get Julie Sains to do it because
I bet.
Yes.
But what does she do? What's her secret to a beef stew?
My wife, I'll die on this hill. She makes the best beef stew I've ever had.
Why? What does she do?
I don't know. I don't watch what she does. She cooks onions. She cooks corn.
Does she put it in a slow cooker?
Stew. It's really, really, really good. There's a lot of vegetables in there, and she just makes it really good. I love it. I love when she puts carrots in it too. So I love the way she used to.
There is a recipe. I can do a whole show on this. I got banned from a Twitter kind of talk show over this, and I'm proud of it. There's a recipe online you can find very easily for Paul Lynde, Lynde, Uncle Arthur from Bewitched, Paul Lynde beef stew, and it was a recipe he had. He tinkered with it apparently forever, and it's you don't brown the meat. Most of the stuff's canned. You drain it, you throw it in, you put it together. It is one of the best recipes I've ever cooked. And I cook it all the time now. For the past 10 years or so, I've been a fiend with this. Everybody loves it. It's easy to make. So easy. And it's just so tasty. And it doesn't use a slow cooker. What Lynde uses is a casserole dish in an oven at about 225, 250 for anywhere between 6 to 9 or 10 hours. And wow, the whole house will smell great. Yeah. If Julie's ever, working and you want to have something for her when she gets home and impress her with a different beef stew, another good one, she will be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Some production notes here, guys. The film was.
We're done talking about the stew.
Yeah, the film was directed by Bob Clark and written by playwright.
Yeah, I just Googled it, and you can find several copies of that recipe. So,
playwright John Hopkins, who scripted the Bond film Thunderball. The script partially was inspired by Elwyn Jones' book The Ripper File. Mm-hmm. Hopkins referenced Conan Doyle's work, particularly Holmes' dedication and science skills, but downplayed other aspects of the character, such as Holmes' drug use, in favor of making them more likable and human. Film stars Christopher Plummer, we know, James Mason, we know. Also, Donald Sutherland is in this movie as well.
Yeah, Joel, we love that you're doing this, but we saw the movie.
No, I know.
Yes.
What did you guys think of Donald Sutherland?
For viewers, it looked like it was filmed right around the time he filmed the Great Train Robbery, and because he's got the same hair. I'm a good cook.
Yeah, I'm not making fun of you. I'm actually saying we should talk about that instead of instead of having Jewel read the Wikipedia page about this movie.
It's Donald Sutherland. It looked like his makeup, his hair, everything was exactly the same as it was in Great Train Robbery, which is another. Julie, have you ever seen that?
Yeah, I've seen Great Train Robbery a
That's a
long
good
time
movie.
ago.
And I remember I paused the film several times when it was just on Donald Sutherland in the chair with that insane Count Potofi hair and all of that. And I thought, only in the 70s could this man be considered one of the great sex symbols of the decade. It was a better time.
I have a question for you about Donald Sutherland. Him or Alan Alda's Hawkeye Pierce? Who do you prefer?
Very different characters who have the same name. I think that I mean, I'll always side with Sutherland because it's the original, sort of, and it's he's a little cooler. He's not as easily rattled, and I like that sense of detachment that he has, and he has a signature whistle that I use even in class to get people's attention, and he does throughout the. It's like Doc Savage's trill, and that movie's Robert Altman. So you got a whole other thing going on, but I love the Alan Alda Hawkeye. I think for it to really be a fair double blind, you have to take one of those late series preachy sanctimonious mash episodes and put Sutherland in that and see how he does, and then take Alda and put him in the Altman movie and see how he does.
Yeah. What did you think of Donald Sutherland in this movie, Gord?
I think he did a good job.
Yeah, he was fun to watch. So he's always fun to watch. So, even in a movie called Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Okay, first it's the chicken corn chowder, now the Buffy. Jewel, are you trying to provoke anger between me and Patrick?
No, actually, fun story.
What is this? Are you doing this because you hope you get greater views?
No, I've never worried about views. But for that movie, Donald Sutherland would not talk about that movie when he was doing it. He would just write it down. Oh, this is what I'm doing. I guess he didn't.
Wait a minute, what? When he was filming it, he wouldn't talk about it?
When he was filming when he was filming the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie.
He wouldn't talk about Buffy.
He wouldn't say people would ask him, what are you doing? He wouldn't say. He'd write it down on a piece of paper.
The title.
Yeah.
I can get into Joss
He
Whedon
probably thought he was
titles
pulling a John Carradine and doing a role for money. So
Yeah.
Gee, I wonder. Rutger Hauer, sponsored by Jenny Craig. But that was a vampire who had eaten very well. This is the thing about Joss Whedon titles. He loves to convince you that he's making an ironic story, and the titles are all ironic because they're all very weak. They're all very childlike. Buffy Angel. Here's irony, Jess. You have a show called Slayer, and you tune in, and the Slayer is named Buffy. There you've got the irony. You've got, you go into one thing, there's a little reversal of expectation. But when you just call it Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it's condescending, it does all the work for you, and boring.
Yeah. Back to a movie that isn't boring, which is this, Murder by Decree. It's very fun. What did you guys think of the sanitarium scene that we got? I thought it was very
horrific.
Pretty.
Yeah.
I mean, any accurate Victorian sanitarium scene is going to be a chamber of horrors. No wonder it gets the reaction from Holmes it does. This is I got some stuff to say about the portrayal of Holmes in this, but Gordon, what do you think of the sanitarium scenes?
I think it was a good way to handle kind of some of the exposition, and I think it's handled with very delicate care. and I think Bujold hits the right note because she could have easily played this as, it could have been the really bad version of Marie Wallace as Jenny in 1897, or it could have been kind of spacey. A later term would be manic. Was it magic manic pixie girl, or someone
Manic Pixie
magical?
Dream Girl.
Manic. Okay, thank you. But it's the right tone of someone who is broken with reality, has had a traumatic experience. And one of the things that the film doesn't go into, that some of the backing things did, is that one of the reasons that Eddie had a predilection for Victorian sex workers. So there might be the implication that she has syphilis, which causes mental. But they don't mention that in the movie because you're not going to mention that in the 1970s. But I think that was, and I think that scene, yes, the sanitarium scene was a chamber of horrors, but I think the really genuine moment, and I think a lot of that is the way Plummer plays Holmes. That it's not that, a lot of portrayals of Holmes since Rathbone have been on the edge, very straightforward, very much to the point, with some exceptions. Like Robert Stevens was bitchy Holmes. Nicole Williamson, who was kind of a wild dude in real life, played like manic, crazed, coked out Holmes. Plummer hits Holmes as a very sensitive, very heartwarming, but yet knows when to turn to ice when he needs to be.
I think it's rare that you see Holmes deal with a story this high stakes, where there's still a ticking clock, there's still a series of crimes being done, and the consequences are just horrific. Mm-hmm. Just terrible. It's weird, rough surgery. So I like that, and I don't think we see Holmes as personally invested. His heart is really in this, and he is very compassionate to people, which I think's a lovely choice. And we have to credit Bob Clark, who has the single weirdest resume. We talk about a guy who's successful in every genre. Yeah, Bob Clark is. It's just they're strange genres. He goes from Murder by Decree to Porky's to Christmas Story.
And I wonder, I wonder if he saw himself as just like a working director, like hire me and I'll crank it out, or if he saw himself as like, oh, okay. Like John Carpenter did a lot of studio work where things were handed to him, but I could see Carpenter being offered 5 things and going, no, I know what I can do with this one. I'd rather not do anything else.
Well, here's the evidence with Clark. His output is not robust. Many years in between films sometimes. And because of that, I think he probably was kind of, selling what he could do. Yeah, sure. You want me to direct it? I'll direct it. But then privately, his resolution was, I'm going to direct the best, most original, most memorable version of this that I can.
Yeah, he also directed the original Black Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Great movie, by the way. Go watch it if you guys haven't. If anybody hasn't, really, really entertaining movie. This is too. The sanitarium scenes reminded me of the Shellbridge Cradle from Thief 3, the video game, which is a game that gets a sanitarium right. Now, there's a whole history of that I'll talk about another time. But with this, I love how they do the sanitarium scene. It's very well. It's not so well lit that it's so bright and beautiful. It's lit just enough so you can see the people in it, that you can see their surroundings, and how awful it looks. It's just terrifying. I mean, my God. What do you guys give this movie? 1 out of 10?
I give it a 10. I think
I give it a 10 out of 10.
It's totally successful. There's no room for improvement given the elements that Clark had to put it together. None.
And having to tell the story with established historical facts is also a big challenge, and I think he handles it masterfully.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I give this a 10. I also love the physicality that we get in this movie, not just with Watson, but with Holmes as well. Both men go a great length in getting physical up here. Holmes gets cut. He gets nearly run over by a stagecoach. I mean, it's
Watson takes a red hot poker to the chest.
I know, right?
God,
I love how that one guy he took like this flame and he like threw it at Holmes.
Yeah, just throwing fire.
Yeah, like Jesus, like what the hell? What's you guys' favorite scene in this movie?
Oh yeah.
There's so many great scenes in this movie.
I'll tell you what mine is while he's cogitating. It's a very simple scene, but it's a moment that is impossible for me to forget, and that's the peas. The eating of the peas and the difference of methodology between the two men and how much it symbolizes, but the fact is also just very funny. You know, if you live with someone long enough, you really start to get used to these weird idiosyncrasies, and you just want to go over, take a fork, and mash the peas.
I think my favorite scene, it comes at the very end, the exchange between Watson and Holmes. When Holmes asks if if I may, Watson, I would like to play. Watson gives him permission. Holmes moves out, and you see that on Watson's face, there's that look of, oh my God, this is all like he's dealing with the weight of it, and then in a single breath he exhales and just starts reading his book. It's like they've been through a lot, but they know they can't do anything more with it, but they just have to move on.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed how they flash back to the opera house scene, because that's where this movie, the movie starts off like that, where they're watching a play, and the fact that they go back to that, and that's where they saw the members of the royal family, if you will. So I like how they did that, how they got to flash back to that scene. I know it's editing, but it's a lot of fun. So, what movie are we doing next, guys?
I can because 7% Solution is so elusive. I'm going to suggest Without a Clue.
Yep, I can.
Okay. And Joel, you're going to love it. You're going to have a great time.
Where can I find that?
It's all over. It does have as the love interest, sort of, Lysette Anthony.
Ooh, nice. From the 91 revival, Angelique. My God. I will definitely. Is tomorrow night good for you guys?
I can do it.
I can do it. In fact, if you check chat.
I do have a challenge for you guys, because I did send you guys that house movie of Sherlock Holmes. Maybe we can do the empty house and the final problem on one whole night.
I think that's a perfectly decent double feature, because they're only an hour each. Yeah. And I think maybe at the end of this, because we're looking at these weird Holmes Elseworlds kind of treatments, that to get to something that is with certain license so close to the text. I mean, they were religious about how they portrayed things. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. What night would you guys want to do that one, the double feature?
Oh, well, can we figure that out after Without a Clue?
Sure. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Is there anything you guys want to add about this movie here?
No, it's a great movie. I had nothing else.
Yeah, if you guys really want to go watch not just a great Sherlock Holmes story, but a great Jack the Ripper story, and with it, this movie, Murder by Decree, is your movie you want to go watch. Links to the Dark Shadows Daybook about is going to be in the description box. Link to Gordon Dymowski's Amazon.
Yeah, and when you watch this movie, be sure you make a nice big pot of Paul Lynde's beef stew.
You will not regret it. Start it in the morning, come home, eat it up, watch the movie. It's a good combination.
And don't take soup advice from me.
Well, if you're a soup fan, then Jules Sane is your man.
Oh my god! In 3 weeks, chapter 2 of my story, Night Mover. Guys, have a good night. Links to are going to be in the description box. See you guys tomorrow.
Okay.
At all.